Episode 94, August the 6th to the 7th, 1915, Dark Night of the Suvla Landing by Compton Mackenzie, read by Peter Welsh. After being invalided during the Dardanelles campaign, Mr. Compton Mackenzie did valuable work as military control officer in Athens in 1916 and as director of Aegean Intelligence Service, Syria, a post to which he was appointed in 1917. At 3:30 on the afternoon of the 6th of August, the thunder of the guns on Hellas, travelling across the clear air to Kefalo, proclaimed that the general attack ordered there had begun. This was intended to occupy the Turks in the southern zone and prevent their moving northward to reinforce the defenders above Anzac, where the Australians and New Zealanders launched their attack at 5:30. The gunfire pulsated on the still air, and by 7 o'clock the whole length of the long line of tawny cliffs was twinkling with starry shells. All through the afternoon, the troops of the 11th Division had been embarking in the new armour-plated mortar lighters that, from their appearance, were known as beetles. 10,000 troops embarked at Imbros, 6,000 were on the way from Mudros. From Mytilene, 4,000 more were steering northward into the unknown out of the unknowable. For half an hour after the last trawler had left Portiero, Canopus had deliberately fouled the cable so that no news of their departure could be signalled from enemy agents in Lesbos. The evening was brilliantly clear. The sea was calm. About 7:30, I stood above the GHQ camp and looked down across the waters of Kefalo to where, on the level land beyond K Beach, hundreds of evacuated tents clustered like ghosts in the twilight. The roadstead was thronged with shipping, and the smoke of many funnels belching into the clear air and making turbid a sky slashed with the crimson of a long, slow sunset suggested the glimpse of a manufacturing town in a hollow of the Black Country, beheld perhaps from some Staffordshire height. One after another, the ships moved out of the harbour. Great liners like the Minneapolis with the newspaper correspondents on board, destroyers, trawlers, beetles, battleships, and many others. By 7:30, the roadstead was empty. The metallic blues and greens and blood reds in the water had turned to a cold, dull grey. Eastwards, the ever-increasing surge and thunder of the guns. Here, an almost horrible quiet. At 10 o'clock, the new landing was due to begin. Hardly anybody spoke at dinner. I was too much excited to go to bed, and from 10 to 12, I worked at an absurd memorandum on a certain Muller family in Mytilene and my proposed scheme for their elimination. At midnight, I went across with George Lloyd to the O tent, where we drank cocoa. No news of any kind had yet arrived, but we told ourselves that we really must not expect any quite so soon as this. Lloyd was listless and downhearted. I urged him to go to bed, such a headache had he, and as I walked with him to his tent, he told me how much he hated being here and doing nothing while this push was on. "I'm doing no good at GHQ to anybody," he said bitterly. "If I were with my regiment, I should feel more respect for myself." It was difficult to reassure George Lloyd when he succumbed to these self-searching moods of despair. I left him and walked back to the O, or operations tent, after telling the orderly in I, or intelligence, to bring across my telegrams. By 1 o'clock there was nobody left in the O tent, except Guy Dornay, Cecil Aspinall, Bartolo, and Cipher Major Orlo Williams with his code books. I felt that depression was setting in here under the strain of waiting for news, and I tried to amuse them by enacting a series of imaginary scenes between various members of the General Staff. Apparently, I was successful in being funny, for Orlo Williams told me the other day that one of his memories of Suvla night was trying not to laugh, because in the bruised condition of his bones, after falling from his horse 2 days before, every laugh was an agony. However, I could not go on being funny indefinitely, and we were soon sitting anxiously waiting for news. A telegram arrived from Bulgaria. I do not recall what it said. A few minutes later, another telegram came in about stores, but there was no word of any landing by the 10th and 11th Divisions of the 9th Corps. Then at last a signal from Anzac was brought in. Aspinall tore it open and flung it down on the table, frowning, and I read it. When does the next hospital ship come? This one is full. A picture of the wounded men lying on the beach under the stars of that dark night, whose darkness was so vital to the success of the operation, must have been in the minds of all of us. I was longing to do something and suggested taking the telegram along to General Birrell, who was the Director of Medical Services. His tent was easy to find, for he had managed to secure for himself one of those double-fly Indian tents, which were a different shape from the hot cones or bell tents in which the rest of us slept. "Who's there?" came the General's muffled voice as I stood in the entrance and waved my lantern at him. "I have a cable from Anzac, General. It says, 'When does the next hospital ship come? This one is full.'" I heard the breath of General Birrell coming in puffs of indignation from the bedclothes. "Tell them General Birrell does not know," he answered fretfully. "I really cannot send a signal like that," I told him. "I'm sitting up to take the intelligence telegrams. I have nothing to do with any others. If you wish to send such an answer, sir, you really must send it yourself." "What time is it?" he asked. "Close on 2 o'clock. "And you mean to tell me I've been woken up at such an hour to answer a question like that? I never heard of anything so completely ridiculous in my life." "Ridiculous or not, you must either get up and answer this telegram yourself, or let it go unanswered till morning." "It's perfectly abominable," the old gentleman groaned. "Well, I can't stay any longer," I said. "Do you wish me to go back to the operations tent and tell Colonel Aspinall that you resent being woken up to answer stupid questions?" "I feel most strongly that I have been woken up in a totally unnecessary way," General Birrell insisted. "I expect the feeling rather strongly about things on the beach at Anzac just now," I said. "But what can I do? I haven't the least idea when the next hospital ship is going to Anzac. Really, General, I must ask you to take this telegram without further discussion. If you do not intend to get out of bed and send a reply, you can initial it and put the time it was shown to you. Then I will take it back to the O tent." Well, I suppose I'd better send a reply myself. I heard a creaking of elderly limbs as the Director of Medical Services got out of bed. After fumbling about with an electric torch, he managed to cover his long, lean figure with a woolen dressing gown. Then he lit his lantern, and, snatching the telegram from me, he started off to send his reply. I left him threading his way by lantern light among the tent ropes and grumbling to himself as the night air played round his ankles. When I got back to the O tent, I found that Cecil Aspinall, after giving moustaches and beards to all the ladies in the weekly illustrated papers, was now drawing wooden lady after wooden lady of his own invention on sheets of foolscap. Guy Dornay made himself some cocoa. I sat listlessly reading stale tattlers and sketches. The matter in them seemed almost as fatuous as poor old muddle-headed General Birrell. 2 o'clock went by without further news. Guy Dornay and I walked out to listen for firing northward. The night was utterly still. General Birrell had gone back to his disturbed sleep. Over the peninsula, the blood-red horn of the waning moon, just risen, was clawing up at the sky. A rocket flamed on the horizon. A ship was hooting mournfully while it waited to be allowed in through the Kephalos boom. At 2:30, somebody in the O tent produced a bottle of Horlick's malted milk lozenges, and we all sat sucking them in a melancholy. Aspinall must have drawn 40 ladies by now, each one becoming a little more wooden than her predecessor. I tried to cheer up things by reading out my scheme for kidnapping the Muller family. Gaidone suggested that I should submit a scheme for kidnapping some of the brigadiers of the new divisions. Good God, Aspinall rapped out suddenly. They must be ashore by now. A telegram came in to say the fouled cable had been mended. That brigade and a half from Mytilene should be nearly off Suvla at this moment. At 3:30 I went outside again to listen for gunfire. The moon, clear of the murk of the peninsula heights by now, was shining very yellow in the eastern sky. But there was no news yet of the 9th Army Corps, though the first grey of dawn was perceptible. Then, at 10 minutes to 4, an orderly came in with a signal. "At last!" cried Aspinall, tearing open the envelope. Then, "Damn!" he groaned, tossing the piece of paper down. "Bamboozled. 800. Punctured," said the message. It was only a code message for the Quartermaster General's department, but it seemed as if some mocking demon had chosen those 2 words to tell us that the Suvla landing had failed. "But they must be ashore by now," said Aspinall miserably. It was now 4 o'clock and time to wake Deeds for the shift from 4 to 7. But before I woke him, I ran down under the paling sky to the signal tents and asked the sergeant in desperation if there was still no news from Suvla. "Only this, sir," he said, "from the signaller on the new landing. It was in reply to us, for it seemed so funny not hearing anything from over there." He wrote out on a form that the signaller of the new landing reported he could now hear hot musketry and the sound of bursting shells around him. I hurried back with this message to the O tent. "Well, they've landed anyway," said Guy Dawnay grimly. "Yes, they've landed," Aspinall agreed, "but this is what we ought to have heard 3 hours ago." I left them to discuss for the 20th time what could have been holding up the operation, and went along to wake Deeds, whose tent was at the top of the lines. The moon was now much higher, a frail silver slip of moon turning to ivory in the pale eastern sky. The little wind of dawn was lisping through the withered herbage and ruffling the sand here and there with cat's paws. The guns had started to growl again. I found Deeds already in his dressing gown, and as he moved nattily about his tent, he would stop from time to time to listen if the kettle on his spirit lamp was beginning to boil. In the glimmering twilight of dawn, he looked more than ever like a pious church worker who was getting ready to attend early service. I told him about the disappointments of the night. He made no comment, but advised me to get off to bed. So I left him and walked down through the rows of tents, which stood out against the wan air of dawn as black as the night, fast receding into the west. It was a long time before I fell sound asleep, for I kept waking to clutch at phantoms. There was no vestige of hope left in my mind that the Suvla landing could now succeed. I felt as if I had watched a system crash to pieces before my eyes, as if I had stood by the deathbed of an old order. The guns I could hear might have been a growling that foretold the murderous folly of the Somme. The war would last now until we had all turned ourselves into Germans to win it. An absurd phrase went singing through my head. We have lost our amateur status tonight. It was foolish for me, who had been old enough to appreciate the muddle of the South African War, to go on believing in the practical value of the public school system. I had really, for long, mistrusted it, but since coming out here, I had fallen once more under its spell, as I might have fallen under the spell of a story by Rudyard Kipling. Yes, the war would go on now. I must remember to write home tomorrow for more woolen underclothes. We should be here indefinitely now. Queer that a man like Sir Ian Hamilton, so perfectly cut out to ride into Constantinople at the head of a victorious army, should be thwarted of his hope. He would appear so Wellingtonian, charging up Achi Baba on a black horse and looking back over his shoulder to wave on. The picture faded as I woke up fully again, and then I trembled once more upon the verge of sleep, with a vision of Sir Ian Hamilton standing beside a drum, the smoke of battle beyond his slim, eager form, the field marshal's baton grasped tightly in one hand, the injured hand by his side lending an added dignity to his appearance, like Nelson's missing arm. The smoke of battle, and along the horizon, the domes and minarets of Constantinople. People, years hence, would stare at the heroic picture and never know what the man himself would have suffered before he could stand proudly up like that as a conqueror. Once more I was fully awake, and that heroic battle piece had faded. There were no domes and minarets along the horizon. There was only the long line of tawny cliffs, and the sun fast overtaking a frail moon in the blank sky of morning. There were only the flies wandering over my mosquito net, and an overwhelming desire to sleep while the day was cool. Last night must somehow be separated from any other night by sleep. It had been too profoundly moving an experience to melt irritably into another dusty day. It must be enshrined in sleep, remembered all the rest of my life as a dream in which I had beheld so many other people's dreams topple over and crash. And away in London, they would be getting up presently, unaware that during the night the old London had vanished.
Goodbye, goodbye, when the tree may be dear from your eye, though it's not so that I know, I'll be gentle to death, I know, don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky, but swallowed finch in the old chin-chin, now poor toodle-oo, goodbye. Brother bird,